Most of us will do what is necessary to save somebody's life. Whether, in my case, whether an Egyptian or an Israeli.
Richard Wright has spent a lifetime witnessing history.
Because the reality is that we're not getting the youngsters in, and the oldsters, we're all dying off. I turned 80 this year. I never figured I was going to get past 30, let alone turning 80.
The retired Lieutenant-Colonel served in the Middle East as a Canadian peacekeeper. He was awarded the Sovereign Medal for Volunteers and served as the national president of the Canadian Association of Veterans in United Nations Peacekeeping. He knows the politics, triumphs, and tragedies in Canadian peacekeeping. But now he worries about what will be lost as a younger generation of peacekeepers don't see a reason to join veterans organizations.
The reality is you send people to separate people, and that's why Lester Pearson won the Nobel Peace Prize. And realistically, that's what we do. And it doesn't matter whether it's us or anybody else from the UN. That's what we do, is we keep people separated. But it's how you do it. And that's what you need to understand, is how they did it, which would have been different than how we did it. So we lose that know-how. That's gone.
Canada has a long history of peacekeeping around the world. Unison TV pays tribute to that and examines how different generations operated as peacekeepers and how they choose to remember.
They're not interested in older people to start off with. That's my own personal opinion. They don't want to hang around people that are 10, 15, 20 years older than they are, because we're their parents. And they do everything online. And I don't blame them for that, but there's more to the world than being on Facebook. The whole idea was to get people who had served on United Nations tours to come together and talk about the tours that they had, because each tour is different than one previous or two previous or the one following or two following. And in actual fact, there's nothing very similar, except everything is similar, because you've got rules and regulations that the UN gives you. You've got rules and regulations that Canada gives you, and there's nobody there. So you're on your honor to understand what these rules and regulations are. And you're also on your honor if you see something that is outside what you have been told the rules and regulations are, and it involves somebody else's life. Most of us will do what is necessary to save somebody's life. Whether, in my case, whether an Egyptian or an Israeli. And I know the chaps that were in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, depending whichever one that you served with, had the same idea. And I've talked with a lot of people who were in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, because we want to get, because they're younger than us. And we in Canada have a big problem with finding people who have served elsewhere to join a service organization, okay, like CAVUNP. We are aging out. When I joined in 2001, there were over 20 chapters, coast to coast to coast, and we had somewhere in the mid 2000s of membership. And this year we're down to 14 chapters, and there's about 336 of us, coast to coast to coast. And it's because there's none of the people from Bosnia on that, although they were UN tours, except for Afghanistan, that want to have anything to do with this. Now there are onesies and twosies, but but there's hundreds and hundreds of people that served in the former republic, because they're all computer literate and they do everything on the computer. They're not interested in older people to start off with. That's my own personal opinion. They don't want to hang around people that are 10, 15, 20 years older than they are because we're their parents. And they do everything online. And I don't blame them for that, but there's more to the world than being on Facebook or being on whatever the local app is that they pass all of the information back and forth between each other. And it's not only our organization that has that problem. All Canadian service organizations, starting with the Legion, have that problem. They don't get the younger people in, which will guarantee that they will stay around for another 40, 50 years. That's not going to happen. And we've got the largest chapter in the country right now. There are 74 of us that are paid up members, and we probably are at least 50% of that higher than the next chapter. Because the reality is that we're not getting the youngsters in, and the oldsters, we're all dying off. I turned 80 this year. I never figured I was going to get past 30, let alone turning 80. But the reality is that there's something in my RMC class. We've lost a number of classmates, but we haven't lost as many as most of us thought we would have lost by now. We're still over 100 around, from 179, I think, of us that graduated in 1969. We're not getting the 30 and 40-year-olds in to keep the age down. And at a point in time, most of us have got some sort of leg, arm, back problem being in the military, especially if you've been in the Army. And even the guys that are in fast jets and stuff like that, they got problems too. And the poor old guys in the Navy, it goes on and on and on, because we're believers. We think that this is a good organization. We're proud of it. We're quite lucky that Canada Lands Corporation, when they were building this, decided that they wanted to do Garrison Green on peacekeepers. And that came out of the blue. And Don Ethel, he was the chapter president at that time. And he got approached by the Canada Lands people, and he said, absolutely. How many names do you want? And so they put 19 names together, of which there are 13 streets. And some of them were deceased, and the rest of them were still alive. And we've done what we think in our presentation of Peacekeeper Day. The first Peacekeeper Day was in 2004 in Peacekeeper Park. The second Peacekeeper Day in 2005 was in Peacekeeper Park and Buffalo Park, because this park was a year behind in construction. It's not that they're isolated.
Right.
They stick with their own crew.
Just
with their crew. And they do this all online stuff. And I don't begrudge them that, because my class does that from what I call the zoo, from RMC. And that's the other reality. is a lot of them probably are still friends with the guys they went through basic training with, and if you're an infanteer, then you've got a large class that goes on and on and on, and you served with those guys throughout your career somewhere. If you had a career of, for sake of argument, I'll say 20 years, you're gonna run into the guys that you that made it with you. Anything post Bosnia or the former Republic of Yugoslavia, we don't see, except for the parents of those killed in all of the memorial cross families that were here today are all from Afghanistan. And I made a mistake way back in 2002 when the Patricias went into Afghanistan. We understood that it was under auspices of the United Nations because I've got all of the records and shit and stuff as to what the UN was doing and doing this, doing that, and that. It looked to us that this we didn't know until I didn't know until 2 years ago that Pat, what the hell's his last name? The CEO of the Patricia Battalion that went into Afghanistan, Pat Stogren, he was seconded to the 101st Airborne Regiment of the Excited States. Nobody told anybody. That was done between DND and the federal government. And the federal government said, nobody knows. And it took 20 years for me personally to find out that it wasn't a UN operation, which is why when the four guys, including Ainsworth Dyer, who's an Olympian, were killed by an American F-16 pilot because he thought the fact that they were doing night shooting, which is what infanteers do, and dropped a 500-pound bomb on them on the range, killed them all. He deservedly was called back to the Excited States, and I guess they shit all over him, which is what they should have done, if you want my personal opinion. But after that, no, there's very, very few people who served in Afghanistan. And, the former Republic of Yugoslavia was early 90s to late 90s, okay? So for sake of argument, there's probably 6 or 7 years of people there that they don't join. And before that, we had major type of UN ops, but they were scattered. They weren't big. They weren't complete units going somewhere. The loss is twofold. You don't get the experience that they experienced because each of the major peacekeeping operations, each and every one of them are different. The reality is you send people to separate people, and that's why Lester Pearson won the Nobel Peace Prize. And realistically, that's what we do. And it doesn't matter whether it's us or anybody else from the UN. That's what we do, is we keep people separated. But it's how you do it. And that's what you need to understand, is how they did it, which would have been different than how we did it. So we lose that know-how. That's gone. The other thing is at a point in time in the next 10 years, Canadian Association of Veterans in the United Nations Peacekeeping is going to be a nolo contendere. We're going to be gone because most of the executives are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm lucky. I turned 80 this year, and my body still hasn't rejected me as much and as badly as I thought it was going to. That was my father flat out refused when I was a teenager to tell me what it was like to fight through Sicily and fight up the Italian boot and then get wounded at the Hitler line. Piece of shrapnel took his calf off, and he got evacuated through the system. And because D-Day had passed through that part of France, he ended up going back to Northwest Europe and spent the rest of the war in Northwest Europe. Wouldn't talk about it. He said nothing, not a thing. And even my mother got upset with him.
My dad was in World War II too.
Never said boo. And of course, they were all alcoholics because that's what they did to shell shock. To forget it, or what we call PTSD now. But they take other drugs and stuff to try to bring them back. And some of them work and some of them don't. And I can remember the first time I was in the sergeant's mess as a teenager. I just couldn't believe but when I graduated from charm school in Kingston, my dad was drinking a 40 ounce of gin a day, and that's how he remained sane. The only people that knew were my mother and my sister, and we wouldn't talk about it. But that whole generation operated with that much alcohol in them. They seemed to do all right. They adjusted really well. At least I think so. Yeah. But he died when he was 72 from cancer.
That seemed old in those days too.
No, but he died from cancer. I think every one of his internal organs was cancerous. And both my mother and I agree that it was because of where he was and what he did during WW2. And all that alcohol didn't help either. But what's the cause and what's the effect? All of the above. I've talked to some of these guys that show up and just to find out what the heck's going on, and said, well, why wouldn't you join? Nope, not interested. And that is the problem. But what our background is different from their backgrounds. And it's different. It's a difference in the way that my parents brought me up, and it's a difference in the way that their parents brought them up. And if you take a look at the kids that are going through high school now, it's even more different the way that their parents are bringing them up. And there's not much you can do. If they say no or not interested, then they're not. The fact that most people have no idea what Canada's peacekeeping has been, because they're never taught it. Unless somebody in your family joined the armed forces and became a peacekeeper, I'll guarantee that your family wouldn't have a clue what peacekeeping is about. Or that we served in, there are 69 major peacekeeping operations that we have fulfilled, including the last one where we sent the big helicopter squadron to Mali to replace the Germans who were sick and tired of it. And guess who replaced us? The Germans, because they couldn't find anybody else.
No one else.
Nobody else. Anyway, the paucity of Canadian history knowledge in this country is abysmal. And I'll tell anybody and everybody that, and then wait for the rebuttal, but nobody rebuts because they don't. It doesn't matter how old they are. They don't understand Canadian history unless you studied Canadian history as your university.
Right. There's
but
not a lot.
I don't have to take my socks and shoes off to figure out who it was.